It was raining when I left the gallery, the sort of cold Parisian rain that feels personal, like it has been conjured solely to drench your bones and tangle your hair. My thin black umbrella had buckled in the wind along Boulevard Saint-Germain, so I carried it by the hook, a limp and useless prop, as droplets splattered against the glassy sidewalk. Behind the gallery's tall windows, I could still make out the flicker of lights, the clinking of wine glasses, and the gentle, performative laughter of strangers discussing someone else's collection, not mine. I'd stood in the hallway for nearly an hour, clutching my portfolio so tightly my knuckles had gone white. Each time the curator approached, "Monsieur Rochefort will call you next," I prepared my practice speech, my half-memorized manifestos about silhouettes and deconstruction, about wearable art for real lives. But when that glass door opened and the assistant waved goodbye with a polite, closed-lipped smile, I knew it was over without a word exchanged. "We're moving in a different direction right now, thank you so much." "Don't give up, darling." The word darling made it sound worse, mocking in its gentleness. I wanted to throw the portfolio into the Seine. I wanted to vanish. Instead, I walked home. My shoes squelched at every step, soles thin and battered from months of pounding the pavements, chasing potential mentors, sponsors, editors, anyone who might see what I saw in my designs. Rain dripped from my bangs and slid down the inside of my collar. It was nearly midnight by the time I reached my minuscule studio rental, squeezed above a bakery with a view of nothing but the splintered wall of the neighboring building. I closed the door quietly, dropped my things on the metal stool and pressed my forehead to the window, watching water crawl down the dirty glass. The word ridiculous echoed in my mind, its syllables distorted by childhood memories and years of scorn. My mother's voice at the kitchen table back in Nice, "Fashion, Léon, you might as well say magician, who pays their rent with thread and daydreams." My older brother Francois, laughing so hard he spilled his coffee. "You'll be sewing buttons at the flea market until you're 50. The neighbors, the aunts, the kids from lycée, the chorus unanimous, their doubts worn into me like an old seam. I'd left them behind, but they hummed in my ears in every moment of loss. That night I sat on my unmade bed shivering and let the world feel vast and unwelcoming. My sketchbook lay open to a page of half-finished evening gowns, a pale blue swoop of silk, an aggressive orange suit, impossible sleeves. The paper wrinkled where raindrops from my coat sleeve had landed. For the first time in 2 years, I wondered if I should finally give up, sell the machine, box my scissors and rulers. Maybe Francois could find me a job as an assistant manager in the supermarket. Maybe I'd return home just for a little while. That thought made me colder than the rain ever could, but I stayed that night. I slept restlessly, woke at dawn, and began again. You never really reconstruct yourself all at once. It's small motions, most of them so minor they go unmarked, gradual shifts in thinking and movement, a little more persistence on the days when you most want to stay in bed. Over the weeks that followed, I worked during the day at a dry cleaner's on Rue de Rennes, steaming blouses and pinning trousers with mechanical patience. I made enough to feed myself, to pay the rent if I skipped cheese and wine. At night, I sat at my folding table and designed. I changed things, tried things I never would have before the gallery rejection. I cut my fabric remnants to shreds, piecing them together in improbable ways. The hem of an old coat joined to a silk slip, layers of tulle over men's working trousers. My touch turned less precious. I stopped worrying about recognition and started thinking about what made me keep going when the world said no. In the stitchwork, I found a secret vindication. It took a while for the new pieces to take form, months molded by hunger and ferocity. I submitted one of the patchwork coats on a dare to a competition meant for emerging voices in French fashion. I almost didn't send it, ashamed of my shoddy seams and patched elbows, but a spark of anger pushed the envelope out of my hand and into the mailbox. A month later, an email arrived. The subject line, "Felicitations, Léon Rousseau." My heart stuttered. They wanted me and my lopsided coat with mismatched buttons to show at their spring event. Not the grand runway, but a small room in a modest hotel near République. It was a speck, a splinter of light, but it was there. I made 6 pieces in 3 weeks, sewing straight through sleepless nights, skin raw from pins. For the first time, other hands wore my clothes, a Tunisian model in a coat made from tablecloths, a shy girl in a suit with neon orange cuffs. The audience was small but attentive. One of the judges, a woman who had stitched in Yves Saint Laurent's atelier in the 80s, found me backstage afterward. She took my hands in hers, her palms were tough as leather, her gaze sharp as needles. "This is real, Léon. Don't waste it." From there, a slow burn began, nothing miraculous, not at first. Small shows, tiny magazine interviews, an invitation from a textile supplier to talk over coffee. I learned that burning rejection at the gallery was not the end, but the beginning of my hardening my edge. Each time a door shut, I found myself constructing an alternative, salvaging scraps, making a new garment from the cast-offs. If Paris taught me one thing, it was that you can never dress rehearse for fate, you must improvise. And the years passed, each one carving away the doubter in me layer by layer. I didn't become famous overnight. I lived in 3 different apartments, each slightly better than the last. Winter sometimes meant boiled potatoes for dinner and layers of scarves indoors when the heat failed. I had models not show up, threads snap 30 seconds before a show, critics mutter amateur in the back row. I called my mother twice a month. She never asked about my work, only if I needed to borrow money. But I kept at it, and Paris at last began to notice. My label, just my name, humble and unadorned, found its way onto a boutique rack in Le Marais. A glossy magazine ran a profile under the headline Le Revue Rebelle. Invitations from Berlin and Milan appeared, each one less improbable than the last. The real test came 5 years after that first rain-soaked walk home. Fashion Forward, the annual gathering of Parisian couture, announced a theme, reconception from margin to mainstream. I pitched a collection, tracing the arc from outcast to acceptance, using only reclaimed fabrics and textiles that reminded me of home. Linen tablecloths, striped market aprons, battered denim from my father's old blouses. I wanted the clothes to feel like a return to the roots you bury beneath shame. Somehow I made the list. The show was scheduled in a restored medieval hall, vaulted ceilings painted with delicate stars, the sort of place that aged generations of gatekeepers might still haunt. It was the most important moment of my life. As I planned, as I sewed, I realized I was no longer afraid of their eyes on me. If anything, I was angry I had waited so long for their permission. The invitations went out to everyone, including, with a tongue-in-cheek sense of justice, my family and a few others from Nice, those who called my work ridiculous, who had rolled their eyes when I talked of Paris and fabrics and possibility. I didn't expect them to come. I sent the tickets more for myself, a last stitch in my patchwork of self-worth. The day of the show, the city sparkled as only Paris can, brittle and bright and anxious. I wore the first coat I ever made, it seems patched 12 times, threads left deliberately loose. The garment was a history and a wound. Backstage, nerves fought pride. The models chatted, smoked, laughed at their reflections in the tall mirrors. Racks lined with my clothes stood like silent sentinels, a wild mess of color, texture, familiarity. I traced the lines of a jacket and remembered my mother hemming a curtain back home, hands moving with the grace of practiced economy. 15 minutes before the start, I poked my head into the audience, and there they were, my brother, hair grayer than I remembered, cramming his long arms into a scratchy-looking blazer. My mother, smaller now, her mouth pursed as she whispered to an aunt. 3 neighbors from our building, a school friend who'd once tripped me in front of a classroom. They looked wary, clustered together, uncertain if they should feel proud or afraid of making a spectacle of themselves here. The lights dimmed, conversation faded into the hush of expectation. Backstage, I pressed a hand to my chest. For a moment, I was back in that apartment above the bakery, raindrops leaking through the walls. Then the music began, a rough, joyful Algerian riff I'd chosen to honor the immigrant workers who'd taught me to sew. My models walked out, one by one, in clothes made from the fragments of my history. The first wore the low-slung jacket, bright cuffs rolled nearly to her elbows. The second, a shirt patterned after my father's old aprons. A third, covered in a billow of layered blue and green, like the Mediterranean seen through grocery store glass. No 2 pieces matched, but all of them belonged to the same family, the family I'd built with each refusal, every night spent alone, every sneer or darling dismissal. From the audience, I saw faces curious, then surprised, then transfixed. The critics murmured their approval, cameras flashed, notebooks sketched, but I kept looking for my mother, my brother, my childhood jury. When the show ended, applause thundered through the hall. It didn't stop. I stayed hidden, breathing hard until the curtain call, when the organizer pushed me forward, almost violently. I walked out, awkward and blinking, to a wave of clapping that felt warm, earnest, unforced. Tiny shouts in French, bravo. And I saw them, my mother, her eyes wide and glassy, Francois standing as if unsure what to do with his hands. The neighbors gawked, equally lost. It was as if none of them had ever expected to see me here on this stage, inside this impossible city and its mad, golden glow. Later, in the mingling crowd, people kissed my cheeks, scribbled notes on napkins, asked for interviews. I found my family at the edge of a stone pillar. My mother pressed a hand to my cheek. "Leon, it's all yours," she asked like she still doubted the truth. "Yes, Mammon, every stitch." She shook her head, shook with something like laughter. "We were wrong," she whispered, so close I could feel her breath. "Wrong to laugh at you. I see it now." Francois gripped my shoulder hard. "People back home, everyone's asking about you. They saw the magazine. The mayor gave a speech, said you make nice proud." He smiled, lines cracking open around his eyes. "You did it, little brother." For a moment I didn't know what to say. A warm, stinging ache rose up behind my ribs, not sadness, not pride, but something heavier and deeper, forged from every year spent clawing for a place in the world. The loss remained, every empty meal, every night listening to scornful voices echo down the phone line. But now, reconstruction, proof tangible as silk under my hands, as applause in my ears. I took them all out to dinner that night, a cramped bistro where we squeezed together, knees knocking beneath the table, ordering bottles of cheap Bordeaux and too many plates of gratin and roast chicken. They told stories about the bakery, the old dog, the landlord who never fixed the gutters. I listened and laughed, translating for models who joined us, their fashion-forked French colliding with my family's thick Niçois. When it grew late and the rain began again on the tiled roof, I looked at my hands, the same hands that once shook so violently I could barely thread a needle. I touched the frayed cuff of my coat and turned to my mother. "I'm not coming home," I told her quietly, "but you're always welcome here." She nodded. "Home travels with you, Leon, I see that now." As we left the bistro, Paris washed away with rain. But I was dry, walking upright, carrying forward all that I had built from loss, stepping into light, into family, into the known and unknown alike.